I used to believe paradise was a place where nothing bad could ever happen. You know the kind? Endless blue skies, water so clear you can see every grain of sand beneath it, and air perfumed with the scent of hibiscus and salt. That was my idea of perfection. But paradise, as I learned, has its shadows. And sometimes those shadows wear the most intoxicating smile you've ever seen. When I booked my trip to Isla Luz, a small idyllic island known for its vibrant culture and postcard-worthy beaches, I was escaping more than my dreary 9 to 5. I was running from heartbreak. My breakup with Alex had left me raw and restless, and I convinced myself that a tropical getaway was the perfect antidote. Little did I know, my journey to heal would become a tangled mess of temptation, danger, and ultimately self-discovery. This isn't just a story about falling for the wrong person. It's about falling for an illusion and the painful process of waking up. From the moment I stepped off the tiny propeller plane and onto Isla Luz's sun-soaked runway, I felt the weight of my old life begin to melt away. The island was everything I'd dreamed of and more. Palm trees swaying lazily in the warm breeze, vibrant markets brimming with handmade jewelry and fragrant spices, and locals who greeted me with warm smiles and melodic accents. I checked into a boutique hotel tucked into the hillside, its balconies offering sweeping views of the ocean. The room was simple but beautiful, white linens, bamboo accents, and a balcony that seemed to float over the sea. As I sipped a welcome cocktail of freshly squeezed pineapple juice and rum, I told myself that this trip was going to be different. This was my time to let go, to find joy again. And then I saw him. Diego was leaning against the bar at the hotel's beachside lounge, a vision of effortless cool. His dark curls were tousled by the breeze, his linen shirt unbuttoned just enough to reveal a hint of a tanned chest. He held a guitar in one hand and a glass of something amber in the other, his lips curved into a lazy smile that seemed to light up the entire room. "New to the island?" he asked, his voice as smooth as the waves lapping the shore. I nodded, suddenly aware of the heat rising to my cheeks. "Just got here today." "Well then," he said, setting down his glass and picking up his guitar. "Welcome to Isla Luz. Let me play you a song you'll never forget." And he did. Diego's song wasn't just music, it was magic. His fingers moved effortlessly over the strings of his guitar, coaxing out a melody that seemed to melt into the night air. The lyrics were in Spanish, a language I barely understood, but the emotion behind them needed no translation. There was a fire in his voice, a kind of raw, unguarded passion that made my pulse quicken. When he finished, the small crowd that had gathered around him erupted into applause. Diego smiled modestly, a hint of mischief glinting in his dark eyes as he turned back to me. "Did you like it?" he asked, his tone casual but his gaze piercing. "It was beautiful," I said honestly, though my voice sounded smaller than I'd intended. "Good," he replied, leaning in just enough that I caught the faint scent of salt and citrus clinging to his skin. "Maybe tomorrow I'll show you more of what makes this island special." I wasn't sure if he meant the island or himself, but either way, I was hooked. The next morning, Diego was waiting for me in the lobby, a pair of vintage aviators perched on his nose and a motorcycle helmet dangling from one hand. "You trust me?" he asked, flashing that heart-stopping smile. I hesitated for a split second before nodding. I told myself it was the adventure I craved, the chance to escape my comfort zone, but deep down I knew it was him. We spent the day exploring hidden beaches and secret coves, places so untouched they felt like they belonged to another world. Diego knew everyone on the island, from the fishermen mending their nets by the shore to the elderly women selling coconuts at roadside stands. He charmed them all, just as he was charming me. By sunset, we were sitting on a rocky outcrop overlooking the ocean, sharing a bottle of local rum. The horizon blazed with shades of gold and crimson, the waves crashing below us in a soothing rhythm. "You're not like the others," Diego said suddenly, his voice low. "Others?" I asked, startled. "The tourists. They come here for the sun and the beaches, but they never really see the island. They don't care about its soul." His words struck a chord in me. For the first time since my arrival, I felt like I was seeing Isla Luz through different eyes, not just as a postcard perfect paradise, but as a living, breathing place with a history and a heart. As the stars began to dot the sky, Diego leaned closer. "Stay here with me," he whispered. It felt like a scene straight out of a romance novel, and maybe that's why I didn't hesitate. I was already falling and I didn't want to stop. The first red flag came a week later, though I didn't recognize it at the time. I had started spending nearly every moment with Diego, drawn to his magnetic energy and the way he made every moment feel electric. But one evening, as we sat at a beach bar sipping cocktails, a local woman approached our table. She was tall and striking with piercing green eyes and an air of confidence that made me instantly self-conscious. "Diego," she said, her voice cold and clipped. "A word." Diego's easygoing demeanor faltered for the briefest moment, but he quickly recovered, flashing her his signature grin. "Not now, Rosa. I'm with someone." Her eyes flicked to me, and I felt an uncomfortable heat rise in my cheeks. Without another word, she turned and walked away, her shoulders stiff with tension. "Who was that?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light. "No one important," Diego said, waving a hand dismissively. "Just an old friend." But the way his jaw tightened told a different story. The second red flag came a few days later, when I overheard a conversation between two hotel staff members. They were speaking in hushed tones, but Diego's name caught my attention. "Another one of them said, shaking her head. "When will they learn?" the other replied. I wanted to ask what they meant, but I couldn't bring myself to. A small voice in the back of my mind warned me that I might not like the answer. It wasn't until the night of the island festival that the truth finally came crashing down on me. Diego and I had spent the day preparing for the celebration, helping to string up lanterns and arrange tables laden with food. By the time the sun set, the entire village was aglow with light and laughter. Music filled the air, and the scent of roasted pork and fresh flowers mingled in the breeze. I was in the middle of dancing when I saw her, Rosa, the woman from the bar. She was standing at the edge of the crowd, watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. I tried to ignore her, but as the night wore on, I found myself seeking her out in the crowd. Eventually, I worked up the courage to approach her. "Rosa," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "Can we talk?" She studied me for a long moment before nodding. "Walk with me." We strolled down the beach in silence, the festival fading into the background. Finally, she spoke. Diego has a way of making you feel like you're the only person in the world, she said, her tone heavy with bitterness. But you're not. You're just the latest. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. What do you mean? I asked, though part of me already knew. She looked at me with something almost like pity. He does this to everyone. The charm, the romance, the promises. It's all an act. He'll keep you around until he gets bored, and then he'll move on, just like he always does. I wanted to argue, to tell her she was wrong, but deep down I couldn't. The red flags I'd ignored, the whispers I'd brushed off, they all came rushing back with brutal clarity. Rosa's words churned in my head like a storm as we walked back to the festival. Every moment I'd spent with Diego replayed in my mind, and for the first time, I noticed the cracks in the facade, the charming words that had seemed too perfect, the way he always avoided questions about his past, the looks from other women that lingered just a little too long. When I returned to the crowd, Diego was exactly where I'd left him, surrounded by people, his laughter ringing out like music, but suddenly, it all felt hollow. I saw him for what he was, a master performer, playing the lead role in a story he perfected with every new tourist who crossed his path. I didn't confront him that night. I couldn't. Instead, I slipped away to my hotel room and spent the night staring at the ceiling, my heart a tangled mess of anger, hurt, and disbelief. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in days. I needed answers. Diego was waiting for me on the beach, his guitar resting on his lap. He looked up and smiled as I approached, but I didn't return it. "Can we talk?" I asked, my voice steady but cold. "Of course," he said, setting the guitar aside. "What's wrong?" I took a deep breath, my hands clenched into fists at my sides. "How many other women have there been?" His smile faltered, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of something that looked like guilt in his eyes. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, his tone defensive. "Don't lie to me, Diego," I said, my voice rising. "I spoke to Rosa. I know about your games." For a moment he said nothing. Then he let out a long sigh, running a hand through his hair. "Look," he said, his voice softer now, "it's not what you think." "Then tell me," I demanded. "Tell me the truth." He hesitated, and in that moment, I realized that whatever he said next wouldn't matter. The damage was done. The trust I'd given him so freely had been shattered, and there was no putting it back together. Leaving Diego was easier than I expected, but it was what came after that proved the hardest. As I packed my bags in the quiet of my hotel room, I felt the weight of everything I had ignored. The red flags, the whispered warnings, the fleeting moments when my gut had screamed at me to pay attention. But regret wasn't going to fix anything. I had come to Isla Luz to escape heartbreak, only to find myself in the middle of another one. Now, it was time to figure out who I was without someone else to define me. The morning after I ended things with Diego, I woke up with no plan, just a restless determination to reclaim my trip. For the first time, I skipped the bustling hotel breakfast and ventured into the local village on my own. I wandered through narrow streets lined with pastel-colored houses, the air rich with the scent of fresh bread and sizzling empanadas. An elderly woman sitting on her porch smiled at me, as I passed, her face crinkling with warmth. Buenos dias, she said, her voice kind. I returned the smile, feeling a flicker of something I hadn't felt in days: connection. I stopped at a small cafe, its wooden tables shaded by a canopy of flowering bougainvillea. As I sipped a cup of thick, rich coffee, I watched the life of the village unfold around me. Children playing soccer in the streets, shopkeepers chatting with customers, fishermen hauling in the morning's catch. It was simple, but it was real. I realized then that I'd spent so much of my time on the island wrapped up in Diego's world that I'd barely scratched the surface of Isla Luz itself. I hadn't come all this way just to live with nothing but memories of him. Over the next few days, I made it my mission to explore the island on my own terms. I signed up for a cooking class hosted by a local family, where I learned how to make tamales wrapped in banana leaves and a fiery red sauce that brought tears to my eyes. The grandmother, a tiny woman with hands worn from decades of kneading dough, laughed as I fanned my face and offered me a cold glass of tamarind juice. "You're strong," she said in halting English, her gaze steady. "Stronger than you think." Her words stuck with me, a quiet affirmation I didn't realize I needed. One afternoon, I hiked to the top of Mirador Hill, a steep climb that left me breathless and drenched in sweat. But when I reached the summit, the view was worth every aching muscle. The island stretched out before me, a patchwork of emerald jungle and turquoise sea, dotted with tiny fishing boats and distant islets. I sat there for hours, letting the wind tangle my hair and the sun warm my skin. It was the first time I'd felt truly at peace since arriving on Isla Luz. Perhaps the most healing moment came on my last night, when I joined a group of locals for a bonfire on the beach. The air was alive with laughter and music, the flames casting flickering shadows on the sand. A young woman named Elena, whom I had met during the cooking class, handed me a piece of paper and a pen. "Write down something you want to let go of," she said, her eyes sparkling in the firelight. I stared at the blank page for a long moment before writing a single word: doubt. When it was my turn, I threw the paper into the fire and watched as the flames consumed it, the edges curling and glowing before turning to ash. It felt symbolic, a small but powerful act of release. By the time I boarded the plane back home, I wasn't the same person who had arrived on Isla Luz. The heartbreak was still there, but it no longer defined me. I had found something more important, a sense of resilience, a reminder that even in the face of pain, there is always room to grow. As the plane soared into the sky, I looked out the window at the island disappearing below me, a bittersweet smile on my lips. I hadn't just survived Diego, I had survived myself, the version of me that doubted, ignored her instincts, and chased after something that wasn't real. And for that, I was grateful. Looking back, my time on Isla Luz taught me a lesson I'll carry with me forever. Trust your instincts. There had been so many moments when I'd felt a niggling doubt, a tiny voice in the back of my mind warning me that something wasn't right. But I'd ignored it, blinded by the allure of Diego's charm and the fantasy he'd created. It's easy to get caught up in the idea of someone, especially when they seem to embody everything you've been searching for. But love, or anything resembling it, shouldn't come at the cost of your own intuition. In today's world, where so much of our lives are curated and filtered, it's more important than ever to look beyond the surface. Whether it's in relationships, social media, or even the stories we tell ourselves, the truth is often buried beneath layers of illusion. My time with Diego was a painful reminder of that, but it was also a gift. It forced me to confront the parts of myself I'd been avoiding, the insecurities, the need for validation, the fear of being alone. And in doing so, it helped me grow. So while I'll never forget the heartbreak, I'll also never forget the strength I found in its wake. Because sometimes the most valuable lessons come wrapped in the most painful experiences. Thanks for watching. Shout out to our regular viewers. Your encouragement keeps me inspired. If you enjoyed this journey into Caribbean culture, don't forget to subscribe for more captivating stories.